Vasuki sir. Namaste.
Namaskara.
Welcome to Prana Stories.
Thank you.
I'm so happy that you are here after 2 or 3 weeks of chasing you. Sometimes you couldn't come. That's okay. But I understand you are a IT professional. So this is the first time someone who I can understand very well, because we both of us do a 2-5 so-called job. It's not 9 to 5 anyways. It's like a day job that we do. So I can understand your plight balancing between so many things. So welcome once again to Prana Stories.
Thank you.
So like I said, your background is of you're working in the IT field and you're a hardcore engineer. But when did history happen to you? That will be a good brief about. It'll be good for the viewers to know how do you balance this, and when did this bug of history get to you, and when did you start?
Thank you, Praveen, for a very generous introduction. And I want to take this opportunity to greet the audience of Prana Stories and want to compliment Prana Stories for the great content you are creating and putting it out on the web. History for me was a bit of a second love, because my first love was literature, classical literature. And all along my childhood, my lived experiences, the experience I had of my own culture, and the narratives I was getting. My first love is classical literature. Through classical literature, I came into touch with the most exalted aspects of my culture, and it conflicted with a lot of the state sponsored mainstream views about my culture, my history, and so on. The conflict meant that only one of the two versions is true, and that led me to investigate primary sources in my own time and under the guidance of my esteemed guru Shatavadani, Dr. R. Ganesh, and the many friends that I made through his friend circles. One thing led to another, and I ended up reading about the most important periods of our history in my own capacity, and I did not rely upon translations where I need not. And I also, because I had access to classical literature and because I could understand classical literature, at least in the Sanskrit language, I could access aspects which a normal history book would not provide. The cultural part of it, the continuity part of it, and the way the greatest poets, the greatest authors viewed our culture. So this was particularly evident with respect to the history after the arrival of the Muslims into the Indian subcontinent. So that is the period where there is a lot of propaganda that has been pushed in the name of academics into mainstream debates, and hence that is where my interest also took me. However, because I was primarily a student of literature, I was intrigued to know that one of the signal achievements of Indian culture, which is the crystallization of Alankara Shastra or aesthetics, happened in Kashmir in the centuries where Muslims were trying to get into the Indian subcontinent. So it was in a way, you can say it was a chance discovery on my part, because there is no article or no author who has really alluded to it anywhere. But when I see the great names of Indian aesthetics, starting from Bhamaha, and in that line, when we go to Udbhata, Vamana, Anandavardhana, Bhattalollata, Abhinavagupta, the thing I saw was practically all the big names in the line of Indian aesthetics are from Kashmir. And Bhamaha was somewhere in the 7th century. It was he who sort of started this process of crystallization of Alankara Shastra or aesthetics. And the process ended somewhere in the 12th century with Mammata and then Ruyaka writing a grand final chapter to what was a fabulous intellectual journey. So when I made this connection, it triggered my mind. 6th to 12th century was also the time that Islamists were trying to breach through northwest India and get into the plains. So this, when I discovered this link, it took me to places in history where I had initially not planned to go. And as a result of it, I made a small study and published it as an article also on the online journal Preksha. And based on that, I'll be sharing a few facts and connections here.
We'll be sharing that links in the description so people can check that.
Yes, it's a very long article, and all of it I cannot condense into this talk, but it is essential reading to know that how precarious the evolution of one of the great intellectual efforts in human history actually was.
I mean, this gives a very nice segue into our actual topic that we kind of came together to discuss, because right now Prana Stories is doing a series on Kashmir, followed by the Pahalgam attack that happened and all the warlike situation that happened. I thought we should focus on Kashmir. There's a lot of disinformation out there, and whose Kashmir is it? Kashmiri means who? And a lot of disinformation is there. So I started this series, and like you said, you're everybody's guru, Dr. Shaitavadani R. Ganesh. He's the person who started as the first episode on the series, and you are another person. We also had a Kashmiri Pandit who spoke about his lived experience there. So this, I think this series is going very well, and so that gives a nice segue. Since you started from literature, Ganesh sir already gave that kind of history of that literature. This gives a nice segue into the history of Kashmir in the overall history of the northwestern frontier plunder that happened. What was Kashmir at that time? For example, when Qasim came, Ghazni came, or whatever that was, right? Like you said, brilliant literary works were getting done in Kashmir. But what was the political scenario in Kashmir? That's what we can discuss. So, yeah, I'll give it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, unless you see how precarious the political situation was, you cannot appreciate how lucky we are to have the body of work that we actually have today.
Correct, yeah.
And all of that is thanks to the unmatched valor of a handful of frontier Indic kingdoms, which happened to dot those territories in the 6th century. Prior to 6th century, the history of Kashmir is not tumultuous. It's not tumultuous in the sense that although it was changing hands between emperors, it was within the Indic fold. And so it was not an existential conflict. The only time where there is records of maladministration and strife among the population is during the rule of Mihrakula. Before coming to Mihrakula, maybe I can make a point that Kashmir in a way is lucky because there is no other province in the country which has its own recorded history. But Kashmir has a recorded history which has been done by multiple authors. The oldest of them is Kshemendra's Nripavali. Other than that, the most famous one is Kalhana's Rajtarangini. Kalhana's Rajtarangini records the history of Kashmir from the times of legends till about his time, which is the 12th century. Then Jona Raja continued the history of Kashmir, and he made a second version of Rajatarangini. In all, there are 4 versions of Rajatarangini, which cover the time almost till the 16th centuries. So
from 6th to 12th, 12th to 16th.
Even before. So Raj starts from the legends.
Oh, okay.
And Kalhana's Rajatarangini records the times of Kanishka, records the time of Mihrakula. And it was in Rajatarangini that it says that during Mihrakula's time, the population were in strife. Mihrakula is from the dreaded Hunas. So, or as Europe knows them as Huns. The Alkhan Huns is what they call as what they are known as in today's history. So they were a big menace to a lot of countries in their time. And they were successfully repulsed first by the great Gupta Empire. And after their time, although they gained ground, they were eventually pushed out by a confederation involving Yashovarman and the last Gupta Empire, Narasimhagupta. So when Mihirakula was ruling, how the situation in Kashmir was, even that is recorded by Kalhana. So Kalhana's history starts from the legends. And comes all the way till the 12th century.
So can that be timed?
It starts from the origins of Kashmir in the legends of Sati Sarovara and all that. And then he passes through, he says that Srinagara was established by Ashoka.
So it's like when you say legends, it means like from Vedic times?
It is, so more than the Vedic times, the local legends which define the origins of the place is what I would say Kalhana has done.
Then can we speak about that till the 12th century as the first? Let's focus on that, and then we'll move on from the 12th century.
Absolutely, we can do that. Other than Kalhana's Rajatarangini, there are other sources. There are Islamist sources which provide inputs and lot of other sources. But the reason I brought up Kalhana's Rajatarangini was there is no other province of India which has a recorded history like that. So coming back to the history of Kashmir, apart from the Mihirakula episode, Kalhana also records that Srinagara, a very, very rich and beautiful city, was set up in Ashoka's time. And apart from that, we also know from history that the fourth Sangiti or the Buddhist council was also held in Kashmir. So beyond the first two Sangitis, there is a lot of debate within the Buddhist fold as to which one is an authentic Sangiti, which council's decisions are binding, so on and so forth. But it is a recorded fact that the fourth Sangiti or the Buddhist council was held during Kanishka's time in Kashmir's Kundalapura. So Kashmir has a long recorded history. Sanatana, Bauddha, actually it feels awkward to even tell them differently because Bauddha is a part of Sanatana fold only. Buddha never looked at himself as anything other than Sanatani. So it is all present day mischief that classifies Bauddha as something outside of the fold of Sanatana or something which came about as a result of a rebellion against Sanatana. There is no such thing that has happened. And Kashmir's history itself is very proof that Sanatana and Bauddha had a very cordial existence. And even inside the Sanatana fold, you find emperors who are Vishnu Bhaktas, who are Shiva Bhaktas, who patronized Sauramata, so on and so forth. So it was truly the history of Kashmir till it was overrun by Islamists was truly the best of Sanatana Dharma in practice, where it was a melting pot of multiple cultures and it had both an intellectual as well as a martial tradition. So going back to the history of Kashmir, the history of Kashmir becomes interesting from an intellectual perspective because the signal achievements of Kashmir were all done during the Hindu rule of Kashmir, which culminated in the Alankara Shastra that I mentioned earlier by about the 12th century. Other than Alankara Shastra, the famous Acharya of Ayurveda, Charaka, traces his origin to Kashmir. And there are great grammarians, Kayata, who actually commented on Panini's sutras. He is from Kashmir. So Kashmir had a comprehensive intellectual tradition. However, the tradition of Alankara Shastra or aesthetics found its consummate completion in Kashmir, and hence it will forever be a legacy of Kashmir. So I will trace only the key aspects of history while this progression was happening. Now, like I said, the history of Kashmir is not tumultuous till Arabs show up on the borders of India. Huan Sang also records his travels in Kashmir and all that. So Huan Sang's opinions, a lot of it has to be taken with a pinch of salt, but it's a fact that he traveled in Kashmir as well. So after Harshavardhana, there was no big empire in North India till the Gurjara Pratiharas crystallized and took over large parts of North India. However, in the early part of the 7th century, in Arabia, there was a big force that came about in the form of the Prophet Muhammad, who forged his band of followers and set about conquering everything around him. And to its credit, it was a mighty war machine. And in a matter of 50 years, they had conquered all of Arabia, North Africa, and they had gone deep into Europe and as far as France and Spain. And this war machine also trained its eyes on the Indian side. But there, it met its match in the frontier kingdoms of India. The three kingdoms which were at the absolute frontier of India at that point of time were known as, the provinces were known as Zabul or Jabala, Kabul or Kapisha, and Sindh. These three provinces were at the absolute forefront, at the absolute frontier of India, of Hindu India, which was, everything was Hindu India at that point of time, the entire subcontinent. These frontier kingdoms were a mix of Hindu and Buddhist. Even in the ruling class, it was a mix of Buddhists as well as Hindus. For example, the rulers of Kabul or Kapisha, which I just mentioned, they became famous as Kabul Shahis, the Shahi kingdom. In the Shahi kingdom, there is a distinction between Buddhist Shahis and Hindu Shahis. And neither of them rolled the red carpet to the Arabs. Both of them fought the Arabs tooth and nail. So, these three kingdoms, if you see on the map, Kabul and Sindh are very obvious where they are. Zabul was just to the south of Kabul. The kingdom of Kabul and kingdom of Sindh are very obvious. It's easily found on the map. However, the kingdom of Zabul or Jabala, it lays south of Kabul and just north of present-day Balochistan.
Oh, okay.
And it comprised the upper valley of the Helmand River. So this is geographical location of Zabul. And its king was Hindu, and he bore the title of Shahi or Shahya. So present-day Siyastan with its capital in Zaranj was also part of Zabul. It was this bunch of kingdoms which had to be overcome for the Muslims to enter India. Before they tried the land route, they tried the sea route as well. In the early part of the 7th century, the Arabs tried raiding Thane, which is near Mumbai. Bharuch, as well as Debal. Debal is nothing but present-day Karachi. However, they were inflicted a crushing defeat in Debal, and then they decided that the sea route is not working out. Let me try the land route through Makran or Balochistan. Compared to the gains they had made in Europe, by the end of the 7th century, they had practically achieved nothing on the Indic frontier. By the end of the 7th century, which is about 70 years after the faith of Muhammad was forged, they had practically gotten all the way to Europe, but they had not even crossed the Indic frontier kingdoms.
What was happening at Kashmir at that time? Who was the ruler?
At that point of time, Kashmir was ruled by the Karkotas. And the Karkotas had multiple emperors, but what happened by the turn of the century, by the turn of the 7th century, was the Islamists were becoming desperate. So, by the turn of the century, the kingdom of Zabul, which we just talked about, right? Yeah. Jabala. By the turn of the century, they had not made much progress in Sindh. The situation in Kabul and Zabul was even worse. The Arab records talk of a line of kings called Randbals.
Okay.
Randbals, Ratbal, there's a different ways they call them. They were ruling the Kabul area, and they seem to have traumatized the Islamists. And they also had their setbacks in the process because there was constant warfare. But by quickly regrouping, they had inflicted a crushing defeat on the Islamists and had even extracted a ransom. This is by the end of the 7th century. So, the Islamists had made no progress in about 70 years on the Indic frontier. At this point of time, what happens is the Islamists started to make renewed efforts, and the efforts were directed all the way from the Caliph himself in Baghdad. At that time, Al-Hijaj was the governor of Iraq. He raised an army led by his own son-in-law, whose name was Muhammad bin Qasim. So he was the son-in-law of the governor of Iraq, Al-Hijaj. He decided to take another shot at conquering Sindh. So he came with an army. This is around 713 of the Common Era. And due to some incredulous strategic failures on the part of the then Raja of Sindh, Dahir, Qasim wins over Sindh and gains control.
I think he comes twice or thrice, right? He
By 713 CE, he breaks through.
breaks through, yeah. No, what I'm trying to say, he doesn't do it in first attempt. There are multiple attempts that he makes.
So they had a lot of setbacks in the frontier
Yeah,
kingdoms,
yeah.
and this was the first time they make a breakthrough. By conquering Sindh, even Multan, the provinces including Multan also came into the hands of the Islamists. And as usual, it was attended with the normal depravities that come with it, right? Raja Dahir's daughters were captured and sent to Hijaz as a gift, and all the normal things that started happening in the subcontinent from that point of time. There was also a wholesale slaughter of the inhabitants for 3 days. It's all as per Islamic records, nothing that we are cooking up. So by breaking through Sindh, the Islamists were almost at the door of Kashmir. Their initial attempts to conquer Kashmir were repealed by the Karkota king Chandrapida. And for whatever reason, Qasim was called back by Al-Hajjaj, and he was supposedly murdered by the new caliph in 715. This is a twist for which history doesn't offer reasons, and it is as per the Islamic records. After Qasim's death, Qasim had left behind a governor for Sindh. The Hindus rebelled against the governor, and the governor had an absolute task just to hold on to whatever territories they had captured. They lost a lot of territory again, and they were holding on to a small part of Sindh. So that is the story. The governor tried to make further inroads into India, but he was up against mighty kings. He was pushed back by Nagabhatta the first of Ujjaini, Avani Janashraya Pulakeshi of Gujarat, and also most importantly for our current discussion, Lalitaditya Muktapida of Kashmir. It is universally agreed that Lalitaditya Muktapida of the Karkota dynasty was the greatest king Kashmir ever saw. His 36-year rule between 713 to 750 took Kashmir to hitherto unseen heights. In fact, as a military genius, his achievements were so great that after the fall of the Guptas, he was the one who carved out an empire, who carved out the largest empire after the Guptas. So his empire stretched from Kabul all the way till Bengal.
Oh, okay. That entire stretch on the
Entire
top.
stretch.
Okay, wow.
So Lalitaditya Muktapida was a great military general. He is known to have taken military expeditions into Central Asia. This point will be of crucial importance when we consider later, more recent history closer to our time. That Kashmir has a very, very, very close gateway to Central Asia. We'll come back to this in one of our later discussions. The discussion was a great military genius, and he was also a great builder. He built magnificent temples. The Martand Sun Temple, which is in ruins today, was built by Lalitaditya Muktapida. It's a travesty that present-day history books do not attribute space to him and show him in the light he needs to be shown.
Yeah.
However, coming back to the point, because of his awesome military genius, any ambition the Islamists had of reaching the gates of Kashmir were comprehensively crushed. That had to wait for a long time. After Lalitaditya Muktapida, as you can expect, after such a great emperor, it's a hard act to follow. He did not have great successors, and his weak progeny created instant trouble. In fact, Kalhana says that one of his progeny, Vajraditya, introduced into the kingdom practices that befitted only the Mlechas. It is also known that Hisham, the governor of Sindh, during the period under discussion, which is about 768 to 772, he raided Kashmir and secured many prisoners and slaves. So this rapid dissension into chaos was checked by Lalitaditya's grandson Jayapida. He ascended to the throne around 772. His 31-year rule was the last notable period of the Karkota dynasty.
Till 772.
Yes. He ascended the throne in 772, and from there he ruled for 31 years.
31 years, okay. So it's almost like 800.
Safely completes the century for the Kashmir. The point to take away here is, one weak ruler can undo the work of decades. That Lalitaditya Muktapida, whatever he had achieved, could so easily have been undone by his progeny.
Yes.
But luckily his grandson Jayapida came to the rescue. So now we are at the end of the 8th century, almost. Jayapida is also done. In this time, on the Alankar Shastra front, we already had 7th century saw Bhamaha, and in South India, Dandi. So it was not just that the Alankar Shastra was a study of interest only in Kashmir, but it was a pan-India venture. Kanchipuram, Dandi is from Kanchipuram, which was a very famous university town in South India. So Bhamaha and Dandi were contemporaries. Bhamaha was a senior contemporary, but Bhamaha and Dandi were pretty much in the same timeline. And they created two streams of thought which created adherents of their own for a few centuries. So it was during the time of Jayapida that the next stage of evolution of Alankar Shastra happened. His court had two scholars, Udbata and Vamana. They took the discourse further. Vamana especially, through his work, Kavya Alankara Sutra, actually came up with the format which was adopted by future aestheticians. It is the Sutra, Vritti, Udaharana format. And every aesthetician going forward started using it. So he made incremental contributions to what Bhamaha and Dandi had already made. I mean, when I'm saying he, I'm actually trying to cover both Vamana and Udbata. Okay. Udbata and Vamana actually took the side of Bhamaha and Dandi respectively and advanced the discourse a little bit. In the same time, outside of Kashmir, the tiny kingdoms of Kabul and Zabul were still holding on to their territories. Lalitaditya Muktapida was visionary enough to give them due respect and have some of their princes in his court. But this policy was not followed by his successors, and they instead started trying to push the Shahis in an aggressive way. So this is actually the story of Indian history, right? People which really know view of the big picture, trying to assert their egos or some such vain thing, and breaking the big picture for the country. Same was happening here. The Shahis actually started coming under pressure from the Karkotas of Kashmir on one side and the Islamists on the other side. Okay. But still, somehow they still held on. Okay, by the end of the 8th century, they was holding on just about well enough. Sindh was also proving to be a hot potato for the Islamists. And by the end of the 8th century, the Arabs had not more than 3 cities of Sindh to show for 175 years of effort. That is how successful this resistance was. Now, if we move to the 9th century, this is the next century, Jayapida's term on the throne is almost done. And this time is a period of turmoil for practically everyone involved in the picture here. The Abbasid Caliphate was past its golden age under Harun Rashid. They were being pushed back by the reconquistadors in Spain, and there were internal power struggles happening in the caliphate as well. So this meant that the hold of the caliphate on newly acquired Sindh was also weakening. It was all good for the Indics in a way. Because the situation is so bad for them on the home front, the Islamists were just content to retain Multan and Mansura, the two cities, and they were not trying to extract more territory from the Indic kingdoms. The situation was turning bad for them also. In our side also, the situation was quite, how would I say, quite flaky. Okay. It was quite, it was not stable. After the death of Jayapida, his successors were mostly incapable, and the dynasty ended. It entered a period of terminal decline. Inside interior Bharata also, there was a draining power struggle which was developing between the Gurjara Pratiharas and the Rashtrakutas and the Palas. So Gurjara Pratiharas were manning the boundaries of western boundaries of India, and Rashtrakutas were always trying to push them. And if you see our history, Rashtrakutas and Pratiharas had a very draining power struggle. So there are two Islamic testaments we get about them. About the Gurjara Pratiharas, the Islamists say that among the princes of India, there is no greater foe of the Muhammadan faith than he, referring to the Gurjara Pratihara emperor. Simultaneously, about the Rashtrakutas, they say that among all the kings, there is no one to be found who is so partial to the Arabs as the Balhara. Balhara is the name by which the Arabs refer to the Rashtrakuta king. And his subjects follow his example. It is here that we see the seeds of future Indic destruction, where Gurjara Pratiharas knew the dangers the Arab posed, while the Rashtrakutas did not know. Okay. So when you read this history, you get bits and pieces from here and there regarding other parts of India also, which add to our knowledge and understanding of the history of the period. So we should be grateful in this context that the frontier kingdoms of the Shahis, despite frightening odds, did not go and ally with the Islamists and start marching inwards towards India.
Basically, they were the border states.
They were the border states and they behaved like one. So this, when you look at these tidbits of history, you realize how lucky one must be also.
Correct.
In a way. So things could have been so much different if the Shahis had tried to ally with Islamists and start marching inwards. It is for this reason that you are the grateful posterity should remember them, but we are not a grateful posterity, unfortunately.
Yeah, there is no gratitude.
There is no gratitude. So because of the Gurjara Pratiharas, the Arabs could not come through Sindh. Because of these kingdoms, they could not come through the Kashmir area also. So because Gujara Pratiharas were so strong, the only option the Islamists still had was to continue to try breaking through Kabul and Kashmir to enter India. And that is what eventually happened. So in this time, Alankar Shastra's evolution was somewhat stagnating. This Rudrata, can be dated to about 850 CE, was one of the last names that we see in this phase where we are having only incremental advances. His Kavya Alankara contains the first attempt at systematically classifying Alankaras. So although the lines of inquiry initiated by Bhamaha and Dandi were somewhat stagnating, a new revival was happening in the philosophical analysis of the concept of rasa. In the early part of the 9th century, there lived in Kashmir a philosopher named Bhatta Lollata. He was adhering to the Mimamsa school. He propounded the Utpattivada for us. And his younger contemporary, Sri Shankuka, was another philosopher from Kashmir adhering to the Nyaya school. He propounded the Anumitivada. He criticized Lollata's definition of rasa and he gave his own definition. So these are all basically scholastic engagements happening while
the war is going on.
While the war is going on elsewhere. So on the whole, you can say that Sri Shankuka advanced the philosophical debate from what where Bhatta Lollata had left it. And he left it at a phase to be taken over by another intellectual giant about whom we'll talk. In this time, middle of the 9th century, while all this was happening on the intellectual front, the Shahis of Kabul had to undergo a revolution. Their ruler, Lagathurman, he was overthrown by his Brahmin minister called Kallar. And this happened around 850 of the Common Era. He is addressed as Lalliya Shahi by Kalhana. And Lalliya Shahi and his successors were referred to as the Hindu Shahis, as opposed to the Buddhist Shahis before them. So around this time, which is like the second half of the 9th century, there was a Turkish leader, Yaqub bin Layth. He started his career as a robber in Siyastan and founded the Safarid dynasty of Persia. In this tumultuous time, he saw an opportunity in Zabul. Okay, he tried to forge a truce with the king of Zabul, invited him, and he's supposed to have killed him by treachery. The Arabic records themselves say that it was a very treacherous way of killing an adversary. With that, the Indic rule in Zabul came to an end.